They spent $2 million on a birthday party, 70 guests confirmed. 0 showed up. The most feared billionaire in Korea sat alone in the most beautiful room in Seoul, staring at a 5-tier cake no one would cut, surrounded by 70 empty chairs draped in silk, and decided that this was simply who he was, a man that the world had agreed, unanimously and finally, to leave behind. Then an elevator opened, and a black single mother earning $14 an hour, still in her cleaning uniform after a 12-hour shift, walked across that empty ballroom, carrying a crumpled cupcake and her 10-year-old son. What happened next didn't just change 2 lives. It built a foundation that helped 40,000 families. And then, someone tried to burn it all down. Not with fire, with the truth. Or rather, a version of the truth. The kind that is accurate without being complete. The kind that destroys real things without ever lying once. Stay with me. Because what Patricia Dobson did when that headline broke, when the entire world turned against everything she had built, is the part of this story that nobody is talking about. And it will change how you think about loyalty, truth, and what it actually costs to show up for someone when showing up is the hardest possible thing to do. The headline appeared on a Monday morning, as headlines designed to destroy always do. Kim Young Park's charity foundation, funded by blood money. Exclusive documents reveal billions in untraceable criminal assets. By 9 a.m., the story had been shared 4 million times across 6 countries. By noon, 3 separate governments had announced formal inquiries. By 3 p.m., the foundation's major international donors had begun sending emails. Polite at first, then urgent, then threatening. By 5 p.m., 22 of the foundation's 30 global partnerships had suspended their agreements pending investigation. By 6 p.m., Patricia Dobson's office phone had not stopped ringing for 4 straight hours. She sat behind her desk on the 14th floor of the foundation's Seoul headquarters, a desk she had chosen herself, deliberately modest, deliberately facing a window that looked over the city rather than a wall that displayed credentials she had earned. And she did not answer a single call. She was reading. The article was 17 pages long, footnoted, sourced, accompanied by documents that appeared completely genuine, financial records tracing billions of dollars from criminal enterprises through a series of shell companies before emerging, laundered, and ostensibly legitimate, as the philanthropic engine that had helped 40,000 families across 9 countries in its first year of operation. Everything in that article was technically accurate. Patricia had known that for 6 months. She had learned it sitting in a conference room with Kim Young Park's legal team, listening to attorneys explain in careful, measured language that the transformation of illegal assets into charitable capital was not straightforward, that the methodology Young Park had employed to convert his inheritance was unprecedented in its scope, and that while every available legal authority had been consulted at every step, there existed a gray area, a genuine, documented, unavoidable gray area that a determined journalist could frame as criminal conspiracy with a perfectly straight face. Young Park had told her himself before she accepted the directorship. He had told her everything, every shadow, every transaction, every decision that could be interpreted as laundering if you looked at it without context, without the full arc of what he had been trying to accomplish, without understanding that the only alternative to converting dark money into something good was leaving it dark forever. She had accepted the position anyway, because she had spent enough of her life learning one irreducible truth. Redemption without risk is just comfort, and comfort has never changed a single thing. The question now was not whether the story was accurate. The question was what she intended to do about it. Her office door opened without a knock. Jordan appeared in the doorway, school backpack still on his shoulders, face arranged in the particular expression he had inherited from his father, the one that meant he was worried, but had decided, for her sake, to pretend otherwise. He was 11 now. The year had given him 2 inches of height, a Korean vocabulary that regularly outpaced his mother's, and the beginning of a quiet seriousness that Patricia recognized from old photographs of David at the same age. The look of a boy who has started to understand that the world is more complicated than anyone told him, and is deciding whether that revelation should frighten him or fascinate him. Jordan had decided, it seemed, to be fascinated. "It's on every news channel," he said, dropping his backpack into the chair reserved for real conversations. Kids at school were talking about it. "What were they saying?" Patricia asked. "That the foundation is fake." He met her eyes. "That you didn't know where the money came from." She studied her son for a long moment. "And what did you say?" "I said my mom knows everything about the foundation because she runs it." He paused. "Then I said I needed to think before I said anything else." He tilted his head with David's precision. "Was I right? Do you know everything?" The city hummed beyond the glass. Somewhere below, 37 foundation employees were at their desks, fielding calls, drafting statements, waiting to discover whether the organization they had given their professional lives to would survive the week. Somewhere across Seoul, in the penthouse office of the Kim Group headquarters, young Park was in a crisis meeting with attorneys, board members, and government relations consultants who were all talking at once. He had called her at 7 a.m. before the story broke publicly, because his intelligence network had detected the article's preparation weeks earlier. He had known it was coming. He had tried to warn her that morning. The word "tried" was doing considerable work in that sentence. She pushed the thought aside for now. "Yes," she told Jordan, "I know everything." He absorbed this, nodded slowly. "Then you're not surprised?" "No." "And you still think it was right? Taking the job? Building this?" He was asking something deeper than the word suggested. She could hear it in the careful flatness of his voice. He was asking whether the story they had been living for the past 14 months was real. Whether the foundation that had become their purpose, their home, their reason for staying on the other side of the world from everything familiar, whether it was built on something that would hold. Patricia leaned forward, elbows on the desk. "In the first year of this foundation, we funded job training that helped 3,200 single mothers find employment above the poverty line. We provided housing assistance in 9 countries to families who would otherwise have been on the street. We paid for disability therapies for 847 children whose families could not afford them. We built 4 community centers in neighborhoods that had never had one." She paused. "Did that happen?" "Yes." "Was it real?" "Yes." "Then the question is not whether the foundation did good. The question is whether the good it did can survive where it came from." She sat back. "That is a harder question, and I don't have the answer yet." Jordan sat with this the way his father used to sit with difficult things, quietly, without rushing toward a conclusion. He was 10 years old when they arrived in Seoul with 2 suitcases and his mother's determination. He was 11 now, and somewhere in that year, he had learned that patience was not weakness, that waiting for understanding was not the same as doing nothing. "What does Mr. Kim think?" he finally asked. It was exactly the right question, the only question that actually mattered. 47 floors above the city, Kim Young Park was thinking about the failure of imagination. Not the imagination of his enemies, not the imagination of the journalist who had published the article, or the politicians who had announced their inquiries, or the donors who were drafting their withdrawal letters. His own, specifically. The crisis room was full of people he paid significant sums to be brilliant under pressure. His chief legal officer, Park Ji-hyun, a former prosecutor with a forensic mind and the emotional temperature of a glacier. His communications director, Lee Sung-min, who had managed crises for 3 heads of state. His senior board members, each representing hundreds of millions in legitimate interests, now tangled in the morning's headlines. Everyone was talking. The room was full of strategies and counter-strategies, legal frameworks and media positioning, and carefully calibrated language designed to limit damage without admitting fault. Young Park sat at the head of the table and said nothing. He was looking at the card. It lived in a simple frame on the credenza behind his desk now, where he could see it from anywhere in the room. A crumpled piece of construction paper, slightly soft at the edges from a year of daily handling. Stick figures beneath a yellow sun. The handwriting of a 10-year-old boy who had taken care to make it neat. Everyone deserves one person who shows up. He had known the article was coming for 6 weeks. His intelligence network, the last functioning remnant of the dynasty his father had built, entirely repurposed toward early warning, had flagged the journalist's research inquiries to the shell company records in early December. He had known the documents were genuine. He had known the gray area existed because he had spent years carefully navigating it, doing everything legally available to legitimize what his father had built, converting what could be converted, and documenting every step of the process with the meticulous precision of a man who knew, even then, that someone would eventually look. He had not told Patricia for 6 weeks. He had told himself he was giving the legal team time to prepare. He had told himself he was protecting the foundation. He had told himself that managing the situation before she knew about it was a form of leadership. Every one of those explanations was partially true. All of them together were a lie. The truth was that he had been afraid. Not of the article. Not of the legal consequences or the political fallout or the business damage that was now materializing in real time. He had been afraid of a specific thing. The look on her face when she discovered how long he had known and said nothing. The moment when Patricia Dobson, the only person who had ever walked toward him without an agenda, understood that he had treated her the same way everyone else in his life had always been treated. Like someone to be managed rather than trusted. Ji-hyun was speaking. The most defensible legal position establishes that the asset conversion followed every available regulatory pathway at the time of transfer. Subsequent legal developments have not retroactively criminalized the methodology. Current foundation operations are fully compliant with international charity law across all operating jurisdictions. We can demonstrate. She knew, young Park said. The room went quiet. Ji-hyun looked up from her notes. Excuse me? Patricia. She knew the full history before she accepted the directorship. I disclosed the complete asset provenance. She chose to proceed with full information. He let that sit. She is not a victim in this story. The communications director set down his pen with careful precision. She knew the criminal origin of the seed capital. Yes. And she accepted the position anyway. Yes. The room processed this in silence. And then, because young Park had spent his entire life in rooms full of people who calculated before they felt, he watched the calculation happen. He watched every person at that table assess what Patricia's knowledge meant. Not for her, not for what she had risked, not for what her choice had cost her, but for how it could be used. Whether her directorship was now an asset or a liability. Whether the story of a cleaning woman who walked in from the cold was still useful narrative or had become an inconvenient complication. He recognized the calculation precisely because he had performed it himself 10,000 times before. It made him understand something with sudden and complete clarity. He was the most dangerous person in this room. Not because of his family name, not because of the empire behind him, but because he was the only one who had decided, somewhere between an empty birthday party and a crushed cupcake, to stop calculating people and start seeing them. This meeting is over, he said. Patricia's phone rang at 7:43 that evening. Jordan was asleep on the office couch under a borrowed blanket, his math textbook open on his chest, a Korean vocabulary list fanned across the cushion beside him. He had refused to go home without her. She answered on the second ring. I should have called you 6 weeks ago, young Park said. She had been expecting this call for hours. She had not been expecting those words. Silence stretched between them. I knew the article was coming, he continued. My network flagged the journalist's research in December. I had weeks to tell you. I told myself I was giving the legal team time to prepare. I told myself I was protecting the foundation. A pause that carried the full weight of what came next. I was afraid of what you would say. Patricia looked at her sleeping son. I know, she said. Silence again. You knew I was withholding something, he said. I knew you knew something you weren't telling me. Your assistant scheduled 3 meetings with the legal team in December that I wasn't included in. You changed the subject twice during the donor renewal discussions. And you started looking at me differently." She paused. "The way people look at someone they're carrying something for. The way people look when they've decided that protecting you is more important than respecting you." A long, exposed quiet. "I was wrong," he said. "To wait." "Yes," Patricia agreed. "You were." She did not soften it. She had learned early that he did not need softening. He needed truth, offered the same way he had given it to her on a birthday night, when he could have performed composure and instead told her about his father, about Junho dying in the explosion, about the years of isolation that followed. He had given her honesty then, at the cost of everything his family had taught him to protect. She owed him the same now. "Do you want to know what I'm sitting here thinking about?" she asked. "Not the article, not my reputation, not the political fallout." She let the question breathe. "The 47 families in the Busan housing program whose leases expire in March. If the foundation loses legal status before renewal, they return to the street. The 847 children in the disability therapy program who have appointments next week that no one will pay for if our donor agreements collapse." Her voice was steady and absolute. "Those are the people I'm thinking about, because they trusted us, and trust is the one thing you cannot recover by issuing a legal statement." She heard him exhale. "We are issuing a full public disclosure," he said. "Complete financial history, every transaction, every conversion, every decision point, who made it and why. We will not defend the gray area by hiding further inside it. We will explain it entirely and let people decide. That will cost you." It was a statement, not a question. "The legitimate business relationships, the government contracts, the political partnerships you've spent 5 years building. Possibly everything," he said. "And you're prepared for that." The pause before he answered was the kind that meant a person was not performing conviction, but actually locating it. "I built something I wanted to be proud of," he said finally. "I can only be proud of it if I'm honest about what it cost to build it." Then, quieter, "I failed you by waiting. I want you to know that I understand that clearly." Patricia looked at Jordan's sleeping face, the math textbook rising and falling with each breath, the vocabulary list with his careful handwriting. An 11-year-old boy doing homework in his mother's office at 8 o'clock at night because he had decided, somewhere in the past 14 months, that where she was home. David would have liked this man, not the billionaire, not the mafia heir whose name made entire governments nervous. The man who called at 7:43 p.m. to say that he had been afraid. David had always said that the bravest thing a human being could do was name the thing that frightened them, because unnamed fears controlled you, but named fears could be faced. "I'm not going anywhere," Patricia said. A sound on his end of the line. Small, involuntary. The sound a person makes when they have braced for impact and the impact does not arrive. "I didn't say I wasn't angry," she added immediately. "I'm furious. We are going to have a very long conversation about what transparency actually means when you ask someone to stake their name and their son's future on your foundation." She let that land fully. "But I'm not leaving. Because walking away from hard things is exactly how hard things win. And I did not cross an ocean and rebuild my life from nothing to walk away from hard things." Before we go further, if you have ever stayed when everything in you said leave, if you have ever chosen the harder right thing over the easier exit, pause for just a moment and write the word steadfast in the comments below. Tell me where in the world you're watching from. Because what Patricia did in that phone call, that is not weakness. That is the most powerful form of courage that exists. And I want to know you understand that. The public disclosure took 9 days to prepare. Young Park's legal team worked through consecutive nights. Patricia's communication staff, people she had hired for their integrity before their credentials, produced explanatory materials in 14 languages. They documented every transaction, every conversion, every legal consultation, Every decision point where young Park had chosen to transform criminal capital into charitable work rather than simply inherit and expand what his father had built. They also documented something the original article had not mentioned: a name. Han Dae-jung. The journalist who had written the exposé was 28 years old, a reporter for a financial investigations outlet known for rigorous, important work. Patricia had read everything he had published. He was good. He was genuinely committed to accountability journalism. He believed, evidently, with real conviction, that powerful people should not be allowed to launder their histories along with their money. He was also, according to young Park's intelligence network, the nephew of Choi Byung-soo. Choi Byung-soo had been a senior associate of the Kim family operations for 20 years. He had been legally removed from all business relationships with young Park's restructuring 3 years prior. The restructuring that had dismantled the criminal infrastructure, including an organized trafficking network that Choi Byung-soo had personally supervised, had cost Choi everything he had built over 2 decades. He had been waiting ever since. The documents he had given his nephew were real. Every one of them authenticated, verified, accurate in every particular. They were also a weapon assembled by a man whose organization had trafficked human beings, deployed against a foundation that had been built partly to undo the damage that organization had caused. Truth as an instrument of vengeance. Patricia sat with this knowledge for 3 days, not because she didn't know what to do, but because she understood that what she was about to do would seem, to everyone advising her, like a form of professional insanity. She picked up the phone and called Han Dae-jung directly. She invited him to lunch. He arrived at the foundation's small conference room, looking like a man who had spent the walk over rehearsing his defense. He was younger than his byline photograph suggested, with the slightly hollowed eyes of someone not sleeping well and the careful posture of a person who has recently discovered that a story they thought was straightforward has become something considerably more complicated. He wore a suit that was good, but slightly too new. Purchased, Patricia suspected, for the professional meetings that had multiplied suddenly around him. She recognized the effort of trying to look like you belonged somewhere you weren't sure you belonged. She had made that effort herself, in this same city, in rooms where her cleaning uniform had been replaced by something more appropriate, but the feeling of not belonging had persisted anyway. She poured 2 cups of tea and set one in front of him. He looked at it the way people look at things offered by people they've been told to be afraid of. Patricia sat across from him and folded her hands. "Your uncle is Choi Byung-soo." The color left his face. "I'm not going to use that information publicly," she said, before he could speak. "I want to be absolutely clear about that immediately, because I suspect you came here expecting this meeting to be a threat. It is not." She met his eyes. "I have one question, then I want to hear your answer." He steadied himself. "What's the question?" "Was the article true?" A long pause. Every document was authenticated. Every source was independently verified. The financial records clearly show. "That's not what I asked." Her voice was even, patient, and completely unmovable. "I asked if it was true, not whether it was accurate." She let the distinction settle in the space between them. Accurate means the facts are correct. True means the complete picture is represented. You know there is a difference. Every serious journalist knows there is a difference. Han Dae-jung looked at his tea. "My uncle lost everything when young Park restructured the family operations," he said, finally, quietly. He had spent 20 years building his position in that organization. When the restructuring happened, he was removed from every business relationship, every asset, every connection. Legally, completely. He looked up. "He came to me with the documents a year ago. I verified every one independently. I did not use his word for a single fact." "I know," Patricia said. "The financial trail is real." "It is," she agreed. "So is the hospital in Gwangju that the converted funds built. So is the housing program serving the 47 families in Busan. So is the documented fact that your uncle's division of the Kim organization trafficked women from rural communities across 3 provinces before Young Park's restructuring dismantled it. She paused. You knew about that part too. The silence that followed was the kind that cannot be filled with words. Yes, he said, very quietly. You chose not to include it. He said nothing. Patricia picked up her tea. I'm not here to tell you that your journalism was wrong, she said, and she meant it completely. Accountability reporting on the origin of charitable capital is not just acceptable, it is necessary. The public has a right to know where money comes from. The people this foundation serves deserve to know the full history of what funds their programs. If I were in your position, and I did not have the full picture, I might have written the same article. She set the cup down. But you did have context you chose not to include. And I think you have known since the article published that the picture you presented was not the complete one. Han Dae-young's jaw tightened. Not in anger, in something closer to recognition. If I had disclosed my family connection and my uncle's history with the trafficking operation, the entire story would have been dismissed as personal vendetta, he said. The documents would have been ignored. Nothing would have changed. Possibly, Patricia said, or possibly the story would have been more complicated and more true simultaneously. Those two things are not mutually exclusive. She leaned forward. Mr. Han, you are 28 years old. You wrote something that was partially right and partially incomplete. If no one tells you that clearly, you will do it again. And the next time, you might destroy something that genuinely deserves to survive, and you will have done it without ever technically lying once. He looked at her with the expression of someone who has just been handed a mirror they had been avoiding. What do you want from me? He asked. Access, Patricia said simply. Complete access. Every financial record, every program document, every outcome report, every family we've helped, and every mistake we've made in the process of helping them. Come and see the actual story, not the version my press team would craft, and not the version your uncle needed you to tell. The real, complicated truth of what happens when someone inherits darkness and spends everything they have trying to convert it into light. She paused. Write that story, whatever it concludes. I will not ask to review it before it publishes. The silence stretched long enough that the city outside seemed to pause with it. Why would you trust me? He finally asked. After what I did. Patricia thought about young Park, alone, at a birthday party he had spent $2 million preparing, staring at 70 empty chairs. She thought about Jordan's card, which had become the compass of a $500 million foundation. She thought about herself, standing in the elevator doorway on a rooftop in Seoul, choosing in 3 seconds to walk toward instead of away. Because the entire foundation of this organization was built on one belief, she said, that showing up for people, even people you have every reason not to trust, even in situations where the outcome isn't guaranteed, is the only thing that actually moves the world forward. She looked at him directly. I cannot practice that belief only when it's safe and comfortable. That's not belief, that's strategy. Han Dae-young reached into his briefcase. He removed a notepad. Start from the beginning, he said. The second article ran 3 weeks later. It was longer than the first, significantly more complicated, and it began with a paragraph that no editor had required and no source had requested. Han Dae-young had written it himself at 2 in the morning and sent it to his editor with a note that said, "This stays in, all of it, or I pull the piece." The opening paragraph disclosed his family connection to Choi Byung-soo. It disclosed that his uncle had provided the original documents. It disclosed that his uncle had lost his position in the Kim organization specifically because Young Park had dismantled the trafficking operation his uncle ran. It disclosed that Han Dae-young had verified every document independently, but had known from the beginning that he was holding a weapon assembled by a man with personal reasons to want it deployed. He had chosen to deploy it anyway. He explained why. Not to justify it. He used that word precisely, carefully, making clear the difference between explanation and justification. He had believed, and continued to believe, that the origin of charitable capital was a matter of legitimate public concern. He had believed that the story was important, regardless of who brought it to him. He still believed both things. What he had not done, he wrote, was present the complete picture. And incomplete pictures, however accurate their individual elements, created false impressions. False impressions caused real damage to real people who deserved better. That was a failure of the core obligation of his profession. He was naming it publicly because he had been offered the alternative, anonymity, strategy, the easier path, and had decided that the only honest response to an incomplete truth was a more complete one. Then the article did what only genuinely important journalism can do. It introduced Kim So-yeon. She was 34 years old. She had been trafficked at 19, recruited from a rural village in South Chungcheong Province by members of the organization that Young Park's restructuring had dismantled. She had spent 3 years in circumstances she described only in general terms, her choice, and Han Dae-jung had honored it exactly, before escaping with the help of a rehabilitation program she had not known, until she read the first article, had been funded by a Kim Foundation grant. She had contacted Han Dae-jung 3 days after the first article was published. She had one thing to say, and she wanted to say it on record. "I don't know how to feel about the money that helped me, coming from the same family connected to the organization that hurt me. I don't think I'm supposed to feel one simple thing. But I am alive. My daughter is in school. I have work that I chose. And whoever decided to use that money differently than it had been used before, I needed that decision to happen. Whether they deserve to be forgiven for everything that came before it, I cannot tell you. That question is larger than me. What I can tell you is this. My job is to keep showing up for my daughter. That is the only thing I know how to do. And apparently, somewhere in this complicated story, someone else decided that showing up was the only thing they knew how to do too." The second article was shared 7 million times in its first week. Somewhere in that number, 7 million people who read a story about the difference between accuracy and truth, about the courage it takes to publish the complicated version, about a woman who survived something unsurvivable and found a reason to keep going in the most unexpected place. Somewhere in that 7 million, there is a lesson that no classroom has ever taught more effectively. The most dangerous thing in the world is not a lie. A lie can be disproven. The most dangerous thing is a truth that has been carefully trimmed until it serves someone's purpose. And the most powerful thing, the thing that cuts through all of it, is a person who chooses the complete story, even when the incomplete one was easier. If that distinction means something to you, if you have ever been the person who received only part of the truth and felt the damage it caused, write the word complete in the comments. Because what Han Dae-jung did in that second article is something we need more of in this world. And I want to know that you see it. The governmental investigations concluded 11 months later. Regulators in South Korea, Singapore, and the United States, the 3 jurisdictions with primary authority over the foundation's operations, issued coordinated findings on a Thursday morning in autumn, while Seoul's ginkgo trees carpeted the sidewalks in gold. The asset conversion methodology had operated in a legal gray area. Confirmed. Every available regulatory pathway had been followed at the time of each transfer. Also confirmed. No fraud. No misappropriation of charitable funds. No beneficiary harmed by the capital's origin. The programs were genuine. The outcomes were documented and verified. The 40,000 families were real people with real addresses who had received real, material help. The regulators issued new guidelines establishing a legitimate legal framework for charitable foundations formed from converted criminal assets. Guidelines that legal scholars immediately noted appeared drafted specifically to address the Kim Foundation's methodology and prevent future identical ambiguities. A legal gray area had been converted into law by the same process that had converted criminal capital into charity. Young Park read that particular sentence in the legal commentary and laughed. Not a controlled, measured expression of mild amusement. An actual laugh, surprised out of him, genuine and unguarded, earning a startled look from Mrs. Choi that she immediately noted in her mental record of significant events in 3 generations of Kim family service. She had witnessed financial triumphs. She had witnessed political victories. She had managed crises that would have destroyed lesser organizations. She had never heard Kim Young Park laugh, like he had forgotten to perform composure first. She called Patricia within the hour to report it. Patricia smiled the entire length of the phone call. That evening, while the city celebrated and the foundation staff gathered in the conference room with food someone had ordered and champagne that remained largely untouched because most of them had early shifts tomorrow, Patricia's desk phone rang with a different kind of call. Not a journalist, not a donor, not a government official. The senator's office. The senator whose legislative emergency had prevented his attendance at a birthday party 14 months ago. The senator who had sent a confirmation card in gold ink and disappeared the evening it mattered. His assistant explained, in language calibrated to minimize risk while maximizing opportunity, that the senator had been following the foundation's work with considerable admiration and wished to explore potential partnership opportunities with government social services programs. His schedule had opened considerably. He was prepared to make time. Patricia listened to the complete message. Then she wrote a handwritten note on foundation stationery. Dear Senator, thank you for your interest in the foundation's work. We are always glad to discuss opportunities for partnership. Before we schedule a meeting, I want to share something with you. Every person who works for this organization, from the director to the program coordinators to the staff who answer the phones, was chosen in part because they have demonstrated the capacity to show up when it was not convenient, not comfortable, and not strategically advantageous to do so. We hold our partners to the same standard. If you would like to understand what that looks like in practice, I would be glad to tell you about a birthday party. With respect, Patricia Dobson, Director, the One Who Shows Up Foundation. She sealed it herself. Jordan, watching from the doorway where he had appeared, silently, as he had developed the habit of doing when something significant was happening, said, "Did you just tell a senator to be better before you'd meet with him?" "I invited him to examine his priorities," Patricia said. He thought about this with David's particular precision. Is that the same thing? Sometimes the only way to find out is to send the letter. She held out the envelope. "Mail this on your way to school tomorrow." Jordan took it. He turned it over in his hands, reading her handwriting on the front with the seriousness of someone who understood that certain pieces of paper carried more weight than their physical substance suggested. Then he looked up. "Mom." "Yes." Dad would have liked everything about this. All of it. He said it with the matter-of-fact certainty of a child who has decided something important and is simply reporting it as established fact. "I think wherever he is, he's seen it. I think he's glad we came here." Patricia stood very still. The foundation hummed around them. Phones and keyboards and the distant sound of the celebrations in the conference room. The city beyond the window doing what cities do. Continuing, always continuing, regardless of what any individual inside it was feeling. "I think so too," she said. Jordan nodded once, satisfied, and disappeared down the hallway with the letter. Patricia turned back to the window. She thought about David at the end, the last good week, when he had been well enough to sit in the garden and watch Jordan kick a soccer ball against the fence for 2 hours straight, refusing to stop until he got the angle right. David had looked at her across the yard with that specific expression, the one that meant he was filing something away to carry with him wherever he was going, and said, "He's going to be fine. He already knows that showing up is the whole thing." She had not understood then exactly what he meant. She understood now. She picked up her phone and called Young Park. He answered on the first ring. "The senator called," she said. "I know." A pause. "What did you tell him?" "I told him to be better." She watched the city lights pulse and shift far below. "Same thing you should have told me 6 weeks before the article ran." She let that acknowledgement stand without commentary. He had said it, she had received it. That was enough. "I want to talk about the next phase," she said. "The program you mentioned last month. Children of incarcerated parents." "It's past 9 o'clock, he said. "It is," she agreed. Talk to me about the first child you imagined when you thought of this program. Not the policy framework, not the budget projections. The child. Who were they? What did their face look like? A pause that meant he was actually thinking rather than reaching for a prepared answer. A boy, he said, around Jordan's age. Intelligent. Angry in the specific way children are angry when they understand they are being held accountable for something they had no part in choosing. He stopped. Then, he looks like me, at 12. Patricia closed her eyes. Here was the thing about Kim Young Park that the world had spent a decade failing to understand. The thing that the Ice Prince narrative had buried. The thing his father's shadow had obscured. The thing that 70 empty chairs at a birthday party had temporarily confirmed, and one crumpled cupcake had permanently dismantled. He had never stopped being the boy who played Chopin at the piano, while bodyguards patrolled the gardens outside. He had simply learned, through years of being feared and pitied and abandoned, to hide him very carefully. Patricia had spent 14 months helping him remember where he'd put that boy. "Keep going," she said. "Tell me everything about him." He kept going. The city stretched below the window, 14 floors and an entire world beneath her feet. Somewhere in it, Kim So-yeon was putting her daughter to bed. Somewhere in it, 847 children would sleep tonight because their therapy appointments were still funded. Somewhere in it, Han Dae-jung was at his desk writing something true. Somewhere in it, 47 families in Busan had leases that would be renewed. Somewhere in it, an 11-year-old boy was doing his Korean homework and thinking about his father with the quiet confidence of someone who has decided that grief and gratitude can occupy the same heart without one destroying the other. And here, in this office, on this unremarkable Thursday evening in autumn, two people who should never have found each other kept building. One conversation at a time, one decision at a time, one honest exchange after another, the direction they had chosen. Not a destination, a direction. Forward. Together. Without guarantees. With complete information. With the stubborn, irreducible belief that showing up, even when it cost everything, was never wasted. It was never wasted. There is a lesson inside everything that happened in this story. Not one lesson, but several. And I want to leave you with the ones that I believe matter most. The first, accuracy is not the same as truth. Han Dae-jung published accurate information. But accuracy without completeness created a false picture. In our own lives, we do this constantly, to others and to ourselves. We select the facts that support the story we need to tell and leave out the ones that complicate it. The cost of that incompleteness is always paid by someone, usually someone who trusted us. The second, the people who need you to show up most are rarely the ones you would choose. Patricia had every professional reason to leave when the article broke. Young Park had given her reason to be furious. The foundation was under siege. The easier path was distance. But she had built her entire life on the understanding that the hardest moment is exactly the one that reveals whether your values are real or merely decorative. The third, and this is the one I want you to carry, redemption is not an event. It is not a press conference or a foundation announcement or a regulatory clearance. It is the accumulation of every decision, made quietly and consistently, to add something to the world instead of taking something from it. Young Park had been making those decisions for years before Patricia ever stepped off that elevator. She did not save him. She witnessed him. And being witnessed, truly seen, without pity or agenda or calculation, is sometimes the only thing a person needs to keep going. Kim So-yeon said it most clearly. Her job is to keep showing up for her daughter. That is the whole of it. Not triumph, not arrival. Just showing up for the next moment, and the one after that, and the one after that. Whatever you are carrying tonight, whatever you walked into this video holding, I want you to know that the act of continuing is not small. The act of continuing is everything. If this story gave you something, if it reminded you of someone, if it confirmed something you already believed but needed to hear again, if it challenged something you thought was settled, write the word direction in the comments. Tell me where in the world you are watching from. Tell me what you are still showing up for. And if you want to know what comes in part 3, because part 3 is coming, and what arrives will test everything built across both parts in ways that neither Patricia nor young Park saw coming. Subscribe now with the notification bell so you do not miss it. Because part 3 begins with a phone call. At 3 a.m. from someone young Park believed was dead. I will be here when you come back. Thank you for staying.